Number 10. La Ventanilla Beach Plane Wreck. On the shore of Ventanilla Beach along Mexico's west coast, there's a partially buried plane of mysterious origin. There are conflicting tales about where the aircraft came from and why exactly it ended up where it is. According to local legend, a pilot found himself with no choice but to land the plane when he ran into mechanical issues. Soon enough, it sank into the ground while the wind blew sand toward it, hastening its burial. Another story claims that the aircraft was used for smuggling drugs and that it was shot down by the Mexican army. But information about what happened is scarce at best, so it's hard to say whether the rumors are true. Regardless of the facts, the wreck has proven to be a popular attraction among explorers. Which backstory do you think is more interesting? Would you want to explore the wreck yourself? Number 9. A submerged ghost town. Earlier this year, Spain was hit by a severe drought that dramatically lowered water levels throughout the Galicia region. One reservoir, located along the Limia River in the northwestern part of the country, saw its lowest level since its creation in 1992, fully revealing the ruins of a village that was submerged 30 years ago. Known as Aceredo, it was one of 4 villages that were flooded for the project. Its 120 residents were forcibly evacuated after fighting to save their 70 homes. They complained, protested, and even went on a huge hunger strike, but they ultimately had no other choice but to leave. Before the river began flowing into Aceredo, residents moved the local church and reburied their deceased loved ones. Until recently, the most anyone would see of the former village was an old rooftop sticking out of the water. Drone footage of the newly revealed ruins speak of a place that was abandoned in a hurry. There are empty bottles sitting on tables, a rusty car that was deserted in its parking spot, and an old fountain that still seems to be working. The ruins have sparked a sudden spike in tourism, but the people who once called Aceredo home are less than thrilled to see their destroyed former home. Local resident Francisco Villalonga, who watched the waters rise firsthand, told reporters that he can understand why visitors might find the crumbling village interesting, but that it was difficult to look at for those who grew up in the homes that were taken away from them. The drought is reportedly still wreaking havoc on the region as it continues to expose ghost towns in both Spain and Portugal. Number 8. A hidden forest of marine life. Off the coast of India's financial capital and most populous city, Mumbai, there's a thriving marine ecosystem consisting of algae sponges, glowing coral, barnacles, hermit crabs, octopuses, and other fascinating life forms. Photographer Sarang Naik was surprised to discover such a diverse array of wildlife when he first began exploring the intertidal zone, where land is exposed at low tide and submerged at high tide. Naik says that he deliberately snaps photos of creatures against the city's skyline as a reminder that they occupied the environment before humans arrived. The photographer and lifelong Mumbai resident has been capturing images there for 3 years and still encounters species he's never seen before. He's part of a collective of marine biologists, enthusiasts, and volunteers called the Marine Life of Mumbai. Members have logged nearly 500 species in a diversity database and post photos of their discoveries on the group's Instagram page. The organization's co-founder, marine biologist Abhishek Jamalabad, thinks the intertidal zones across the world are largely neglected. He said that this is ironic given the multitude of unique creatures that are found there and the resilience that they demonstrate by surviving in an ever-changing and polluted habitat that suffers the ill effects of nearby urban development. Number 7. Ancient artwork. In late 2010, a violent storm battered the Israeli coast, bringing 62-mile-per-hour winds that left tens of thousands of households without power and dozens of people injured. While walking along the shore in the city of Ashkelon after the storm, a local resident discovered a headless and armless white marble sculpture of a woman wearing a toga and sandals. It was found half buried near pieces of a mosaic floor that are believed to have come from a Roman bathhouse. The artifacts came from a cliffside archaeological site that collapsed during the storm. Yigal Israel, an archaeologist with the Israel Antiquities Authority, told reporters that the 4-feet-tall, 440-pound statue likely dates back to sometime between 1700 and 2000 years ago during the Roman occupation of western Judea. Speaking with Israeli newspapers, he said that the statue may represent the goddess Aphrodite and was likely imported from Italy, Greece, or Asia Minor. Sadly, the storm was responsible for more destruction than anything. It caused serious damage to the coastal archaeological site and ancient port at Caesarea and washed away far more artifacts than it revealed. In fact, a colleague of Israel said that they would have been happier if the artifacts had remained hidden and protected. Number 6. Historic shipwrecks. During a series of winter storms early last year, 2 historic shipwrecks were revealed along England's Suffolk coast. While walking along Cova Height Beach with his wife, Saxmundham resident Stephen Sugg and his wife spotted some wood sticking out from the sand. It turned out that the wood was the remains of a ship's hull, which was built using wooden tree nails sometimes between the 13th and 19th centuries. Evidence of the vessel first appeared in 2016 before being quickly reburied by coastal sediment. The hostile weather also revealed part of a similarly built wooden ship in Torpenez, roughly 20 miles south of where the first vessel was discovered. When conservation specialist Nicholas Meller first encountered the wreck, he thought it was driftwood. But he took a second look and realized that what he had stumbled upon was too large to be debris. He explained that the ship was likely a warship or a type of coal-carrying cargo ship known as a collier. At the time of their discovery, COVID-19 restrictions prevented experts from visiting the shipwrecks. With only photos to examine and draw conclusions from, it was hard to make any solid factual statements. Archaeologist Andy Sherman speculated in an interview that one of the ships appeared to be made using an unusual technique called double-hull planking. The technique was used mainly in the late 16th and early 17th centuries and is documented in historical records, but there's only one well-known example in the archaeological record, which would qualify the recently discovered wreck as both rare and exciting if Sherman's suspicions were confirmed. Number 5. Spanish Stonehenge. Sometime between 4,000 and 7,000 years ago, ancient people living in what is now Spain built a megalithic monument called the Dolmen of Guadalperal. Better known as the Spanish Stonehenge, the site consists of around 140 boulders arranged in a concentric circle. It was likely used as a temple and a cemetery, although nobody knows for sure. Sadly, the dolmens were deliberately submerged when the Valdecañas Reservoir was created in 1963. The area's younger residents were left feeling curious about the landmark that their elders spoke of, but that they had only seen peeking out of the water's surface at best. The dolmen were fully exposed for the first time in decades during a drought in 2019. Those who had longed to see the Spanish Stonehenge found the site to be both awe-inspiring and alarming. Constructed from highly porous stone, the megaliths bore obvious signs of erosion, cracking, and other damage. Recognizing their historical importance, residents urged officials to remove and preserve the structures. Ángel Castaño, who heads the local cultural association, said that the monument was located in one of the few spots in the river that were shallow enough to cross, and that it may have served an economic purpose in addition to its religious significance. But the dolmens are largely a mystery surrounded by many unanswered questions, including the meanings of some of their engravings. The site's future hangs in the balance as the repeated outcries for its preservation appear to fall on deaf ears and continue to go unanswered by the Spanish government. Why do you think the Spanish government chose this incredible historical site as the location for a reservoir rather than preserving it? Share your theories in the comments and make sure to like and subscribe as well. Number 4. A seaplane in the desert. Built during the 1930s and 40s, the PBY-5A Catalina was one of the most widely used seaplanes that participated in World War II. After the conflict ended, many of these planes fell into civilian hands. Retired businessman Thomas Kindle bought his own Catalina and converted it into a luxury flying machine. During a sightseeing trip around the world with his family in 1960, he parked the plane on a Saudi Arabian beach off the Strait of Tiran. They heard shouting during the night, but ignored it. The next morning, the travelers encountered fierce gunfire. Kindle tried to get the plane started, but he didn't get it very far before it hit a coral reef and ran aground. The Saudi military had mistaken the group for Israeli commandos and took them to Jeddah to be interrogated. Thankfully, the misunderstanding was sorted out with the American ambassador's help, and the family was released. But the Saudi government refused to take responsibility for the fate of Kindle's plane, which has sat abandoned along the shoreline ever since. Number 3. An ancient palace. During the 15th century BC, a kingdom called the Mitanni Empire ruled over an area that encompassed parts of modern-day Iraq, Turkey, and Syria. When the short-lived dynasty fell to the Assyrians during the 14th or 13th century BC, its conquerors destroyed its culture, leaving very little behind in the way of historical records and archaeological evidence. Consequently, the Mitanni people's origins, ethnicity, and lifestyle are largely a mystery. Even their capital city, Taidu, has never been found. In 2019, a drought drastically lowered the water levels of the Mosul Dam in northern Iraq. The receding reservoir exposed the ruins of a Mitanni city called Kemune, giving archaeologists a rare opportunity to explore the site after first discovering it in 2010. They found a palace with 20-foot-high walls that once featured vivid paintings. Located to the south of the city, the royal residence overlooked the Tigris River. It's one of just 4 Mitanni palaces ever found, and unlike the other 3 which sat along the empire's outskirts, it was in the heart of Mitanni territory. The team also found 10 clay tablets inscribed with Mitanni cuneiform, one of the earliest known forms of writing. A translation of one tablet suggests that the city's real name was Zakiku, rather than Kemune. It wasn't long before the site was once again underwater, leaving researchers with no choice but to wait until it's exposed again to further investigate. Number 2. A Petrified Forest. In August of 2020, Storm Francis relentlessly battered the English coast with heavy rainfall and record-breaking winds, causing the waters along the Welsh coast to recede and revealing a previously unseen stretch of ancient forest along the Cardigan Bay. It's not uncommon to see tree stump-covered beaches in Borth, where a forest stopped growing sometime between 4,500 and 6,000 years ago. Parts of the forest were revealed by storms in 2014 and 2019, only to be reburied in the sand within 2 to 3 months. Locals have long wondered where these prehistoric trees came from. They're even mentioned in the oldest surviving Welsh manuscript, which dates back to the 13th century. While there's no evidence that the area was inhabited when the trees were still alive, it appears as though some people have been observing them for quite some time. But the 2020 discovery marked the first time ancient stumps were seen in Lanhyristad, roughly 15 miles south of Borth. At the time of the discovery, researchers said that they were trying to determine if the stumps in both places constituted a continuous stretch of forest or if they represented two different forests that underwent similar processes at different times. Number 1. Erect Boat. Like many places throughout the world, Utah experienced one of its worst droughts on record last year. Visitors at Lake Powell in the southernmost part of the state encountered a shrinking shoreline unlike anything they'd ever seen. During a family fishing trip, a woman named Liz Bowles and her family were surprised to notice things that were normally covered by water, including trees and some garbage, which they were kind enough to clean up while they camped in an area that's normally submerged. But the most shocking discovery came a few days later as they turned a corner in their boat to leave the site and spotted a shipwreck wedged between some rocks along the shoreline. The curious group decided to explore and found that they were able to walk right up to the wrecked boat. They found some of the owner's personal belongings, including silverware, an old shoe, and a spare key. There were also some straps and other signs that someone had tried to retrieve the boat at some point in time. Liz told local television news reporters that she and her fellow travelers did their best not to disturb the wreck in case it was unsafe. The boat's history and how it ended up wrecked along the coast are a mystery. While the unexpected find made for a fun experience for Liz and her family and gave them an interesting tale to take home, the reality of the droughts that have plagued the region in recent years is much more concerning. Hydraulic engineer Heather Patno said that it was the second consecutive extremely dry year at Lake Powell. Patno, who works for the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, further explained that the lake's levels were close to hitting an all-time low that hadn't been seen since the reservoir was originally flooded in 1969. As this continues to happen, it's likely that visitors will encounter more fascinating discoveries along the receding shoreline. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to learn more about hidden secrets revealed by water, let me know in the comments below and be sure to subscribe. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time for another amazing video right here on American Eye.